"You're shameful, Dad. Just sit down and don't ruin her day." That's what my son hissed at me as I stood up to give the wedding toast. My hands trembled, not from age, but from disbelief. I had raised him. Buried his mother with my own hands. Paid for this entire wedding down to the damn napkins. And now, in front of 200 people, I was being told to sit down, like a child. He took the mic from me. But I didn't sit. I walked up, took it back, and said everything I had kept inside for years. There was a time when I believed my family would always be my greatest pride. After Marjorie passed, I poured everything I had into raising Daniel. He was only 12 when the cancer took her. I remember the night she died, her hand in mine, whispering, "Don't let him drift too far." I didn't fully understand what she meant back then. But I clung to that promise like it was the only thing keeping me alive. I never remarried. I couldn't. She was it for me. I traded my night shifts at the mill for something more stable, became a school janitor just so I could be home by 4 o'clock, cook dinner, help with homework, and make sure Daniel never felt the hole his mother left. We had our routines, pancakes every Saturday, fishing trips every second Sunday, and nightly chess games where he always insisted he let me win. When Emily was born, Daniel's only daughter, I was already retired. I remember holding her in my arms and whispering, "You'll call me Papa, and I'll spoil you until I'm gone." She giggled before she could even speak, and when she did finally say, "Papa," I cried like I hadn't since Marjorie's funeral. Daniel and I were never as close as I hoped, even when he was younger. He was a serious boy, always chasing approval, from teachers, coaches, later bosses. He didn't laugh as easily as Emily did. But he never disrespected me. Not back then. He called on Sundays. He brought Emily over for dinner. He even asked my opinion on his job, his mortgage. It wasn't warmth, but it was a kind of respect. I held on to that. I used to take Emily to the park every Wednesday when she was little. Marjorie's park, the one the town built behind the library. Emily would ask for stories about her grandma, and I'd tell them all, how Marjorie made the best peach pie, how she once punched a man who called her son a brat, how she could hum every song from our wedding by heart. Emily loved those stories. She loved Marjorie without ever meeting her. I think that's why she stayed close to me, even when Daniel and Miriam started pulling away. Speaking of Miriam, Daniel's wife, we were never truly close. She wasn't unkind in the beginning, just formal. Polite in that way that makes you feel like a stranger in your own home. She never called me Dad, always Mr. Ainsley. I never minded, but Marjorie would have. She believed names mattered, that closeness had to be spoken aloud. Still, I kept giving. I offered the down payment for their first home. Gave them our old car when theirs broke down. Paid for Emily's private school when Daniel got laid off. I never expected repayment. It wasn't about that. I wanted to be useful. To keep my promise to Marjorie, keep the family together. Our house, the one I still live in, was always open. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. I hosted every year. Cooked for hours. Set Marjorie's best china out. Emily would help me fold napkins and light candles. She'd sneak mashed potatoes before dinner and laugh like a thief. Those were the years that kept me alive. They felt real. They felt like love. But I suppose nothing stays still forever. There were signs, even back then. Daniel stopped bringing over tools I asked for, said I should hire someone instead. Miriam started showing up late to dinners, claiming something came up. Emily would apologize for them, quietly squeeze my hand under the table. I'd just smile and say, "It's all right, sweetheart. Life gets busy." I didn't want to seem bitter. I didn't want to believe that the distance wasn't temporary. I remember one night, maybe 5 years ago, Daniel said, "Dad, you should think about downsizing. That house is too much for you. I laughed it off. Too much? This house raised you. Built it with my hands, Daniel. He didn't laugh. Just said, things change, Dad. And they did. I started being excluded from decisions. Small things at first, where to go for family vacations, which school Emily should attend, how much to spend on gifts. I told myself they were just becoming independent. That it was normal. But something shifted after Daniel's promotion. He started talking like a politician, vague, dismissive, all polished phrases and no eye contact. Miriam followed suit, with her glass of wine and tight smiles. And Emily, well, she started hesitating more. Glancing at her parents before she spoke. Asking permission for things she never used to. I told myself it was teenage years. But part of me, the part Marjorie spoke to in those last words, knew better. Still, I didn't push. I stayed generous. I stayed kind. I believed that loyalty would return in time. When Emily got engaged, she came to me first. That gave me hope again. Papa, she said, you'll walk me down the aisle, right? I almost dropped my coffee. Of course I would. I kissed her forehead and said, as long as these legs still work, sweetheart. Then Daniel called a week later. She's young, he began. Just excited. The guest list is tight. It might be better if she walks alone. More modern. I didn't argue. I just said, if that's what she wants, I'll respect it. But I knew. That wasn't her decision. That was his. And hers, by silence. I had no idea then just how far they'd go. No idea that the very people I loved most would one day treat me like an embarrassment. Like a burden to be hidden. Like a man whose time was up. But I'd find out soon enough. The signs were there long before I was willing to admit them. It started with the seating arrangements for the engagement party. Miriam told me, politely but firmly, that I'd be at a reserved table near the back. We just want the younger crowd up front for the speeches and dancing, she said with a smile so thin it could have been cut from glass. I didn't argue. I nodded, even laughed a little. But I felt the weight of it. For the first time, I wasn't in the family center, I was being pushed to the edges. Daniel had changed too. He used to greet me with a hug, even if half-hearted. Lately, it was a nod, maybe a pat on the back. One night after dinner at their house, he asked me if I'd considered moving to somewhere more manageable. That same word again, manageable. A word people use when they're trying to make you disappear without sounding cruel. You could sell the house, get a place near the lake. Somewhere peaceful, he said, sipping from his tumbler. And leave Marjorie's garden behind? I asked. He didn't answer. Just looked at Miriam, then changed the subject. That garden, that tiny patch of earth behind the porch, was her pride. Tulips in spring, tomatoes in summer, mums in fall. I kept it going for her. For us. And now it was just another inconvenience to them. The wedding planning made everything worse. At first, I offered to help. Not to control, just to support. I'd been through one wedding in my life, mine, and I thought maybe some wisdom might be welcome. I offered to drive them to a venue one weekend, and Miriam responded with, "Oh, the venues we're considering. Probably wouldn't be your thing." She said it with a laugh, as if dismissing me was a joke we could all share. The next week, I found out from Emily, not Daniel, that they'd booked a place. It just happened so fast, Papa, she said, eyes darting like she didn't want to tell me. They wanted to lock in the date. I smiled, told her it was all right, but inside I was sinking. They didn't even ask if I could make it. They just assumed. That was the start of it, being kept out of the loop, little by little. They created a wedding website. Someone at church mentioned it, so I went to look. Scrolling through, I saw photos of Emily and her fiancé, of course. A whole section on Miriam's family, even childhood photos of Daniel. But not a single mention of me. Not one. No picture. No, father of the bride's grandfather, note. No credit for paying half of it. Just blank space where a lifetime of love should have been. I tried to brush it off. Told myself, it's their day. Not about me. But that excuse wore thin every time I heard Miriam say, it's tradition, only when it suited her. Traditions like expensive centerpieces and name-engraved candles mattered. But the tradition of me giving a toast, the same way I had at every family celebration, was deemed too old-fashioned. And Daniel? He just let it happen. He'd always been cautious, private, even a bit emotionally stiff. But lately, his distance felt intentional. Cold. Like he was building a new life and there was no room for the man who taught him how to ride a bike or fixed his car after college. I remember one evening in particular. I'd driven over with a box of old family photos. I thought Emily might want them for the wedding, pictures of Marjorie, baby shots of Daniel, even a few of Emily as a toddler with flour all over her face helping me bake. Miriam opened the door. Looked at the box. That's sweet, she said, not inviting me in. We're going for a cleaner aesthetic. Maybe for another event? She closed the door before I could respond. I sat in the car for 15 minutes before I could drive away. And yet, the worst part wasn't their words. It was their silence. The way they would talk over me at dinners. The way Daniel would glance at Miriam before answering anything I asked. The way Emily started deferring to them, even when I knew her heart didn't agree. She'd squeeze my hand when they weren't looking, but never said a word aloud. I began to wonder what I had done wrong. Had I held on too tightly to old ways? Had I made them feel smothered? Had I given too much, expected too little? One day, I tried asking Daniel directly. Do you think I've overstayed my welcome in your life? I said, half joking. He looked at me like I'd asked him for money. What do you mean? I mean, if I'm being a burden. He scoffed. Dad, don't be dramatic. We're just busy. Things are changing. That word again. Changing. But change shouldn't mean erasing. It shouldn't mean silencing the people who built the foundation you stand on. And yet, I started to feel it more and more, the way they paused when I entered a room, the closed doors, the whispered conversations that stopped when I stepped close. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe I was. But deep down, I wasn't blind. I wasn't senile. I knew. The center was shifting. And I was no longer part of it. I used to think growing old meant getting slower. Weaker. But the real pain of aging is watching the people you love pretend you were never there at all. And still, I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. It was the rehearsal dinner that finally stripped away any doubt I had. Emily had invited me weeks earlier, her voice chipper on the phone, the way she used to be. Papa, you are coming, right? I told them you have to be there. You're the glue. I laughed, said I wouldn't miss it. That phrase stuck with me, the glue. I didn't realize then how close I was to snapping. I arrived early, dressed in the same navy suit I wore to her baptism. It was a little tight around the waist now, but still clean, still sharp. I even brought the toast I had written, not too long, just a few words about love, about Marjorie, about how proud I was. The venue was modern, all glass and chrome, the kind of place where every surface feels too clean to belong to real people. I stood in the entryway with the gift bag I had brought, a scrapbook I made for Emily, full of pictures of her with Marjorie, of our garden, of birthday cakes and storybooks. I thought she might like to open it after dinner. A young man with a headset greeted me. Name? I blinked. Mr. Ainsley. I'm the bride's grandfather. He scanned the list, frowned. You're not on the main seating chart. They might have added a few overflow spots. Overflow. I smiled politely and followed him. He walked me through the main dining room, past tables marked bride's family, groom's college friends, and VIP, then into a smaller side room, barely part of the event space. 2 folding chairs, a bistro table, and a flickering candle. This okay? He asked. I nodded. From that corner, I couldn't hear the speeches clearly. I caught bits and pieces, someone from the groom's side making a joke about trading in your dad for a new one, laughter echoing across the room. I spotted Daniel at the head table, arm around Miriam, laughing. Emily was radiant. She glanced around the room more than once. I hoped she was looking for me. I hoped she noticed I wasn't seated with them. Then came the toasts. Miriam's father stood first. Then the groom's brother. Even a college roommate got a chance to speak. I waited. I watched. I felt the pages of my speech crease under my thumb. Finally, Daniel rose, tapping his glass. Before we wrap, I just want to thank everyone who's been part of this journey. He listed names. Cousins, co-workers, family friends. But not me. Not once. The words never came. I waited a beat, hoping he'd turn, maybe gesture to me, maybe even say, my father made all this possible. I didn't expect much. Just a nod. A glance. Something. But all I got was silence. The program ended. People clapped. The lights dimmed slightly as servers brought dessert. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward the head table. Emily saw me coming. Her eyes widened a little, not in fear, just surprise. I reached Daniel, gently tapped his shoulder. Can I say a few words? He looked at Miriam, then back at me. It's been a long night, Dad. Let's not make a scene. I wrote something. Just a toast. Maybe at the wedding, he said quickly, not meeting my eyes. Emily looked like she might speak, but Miriam stepped between us. There's no time. We're on a tight schedule. You understand, right? No. I didn't. I stood there, humiliated, the small folded paper still in my hand. People watched. No one spoke. I nodded, turned, walked back to my little table in the corner. The candle had gone out. I sat in silence, dessert untouched. My heart thudded like a fist against a locked door. Later that night, as guests began to leave, I tried to find Emily. I wanted to hand her the scrapbook, just slip it to her quietly. But Daniel intercepted me. She's tired, he said. I'll just. Don't make this about you, he snapped under his breath. I stared at him. You're doing that thing again, he continued. Guilt-tripping. Controlling. I hadn't said a word. I'm just trying to give her a good day, he finished. I nodded. Walked away. As I exited the venue, I heard someone whisper, was that her grandfather? And someone else reply, I thought he wasn't invited. That's when it hit me. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't oversight. It wasn't just the way weddings are nowadays. They were embarrassed by me. Daniel, my son, was ashamed of me. Of the life I lived. Of the wrinkles on my face, the stories I told, the simplicity I carried with pride. That night, I sat alone in the driveway for nearly an hour before going inside. The house felt cold, though it was summer. I walked to Marjorie's garden, sat on the bench we had painted together so many springs ago, and tried to imagine what she would say. I could hear her voice, soft but firm, you have given them everything. Now give yourself the truth. And that truth, as bitter as it was, came down to this. They no longer saw me as family. They saw me as furniture, old, sentimental, and best kept out of sight. I thought that would be the end of it. That I could swallow the pain, move on quietly, and keep the peace for Emily's sake. But just a few days later, I would learn something else. Something that would make peace impossible. Because they hadn't just excluded me. They were planning something behind my back. It was 2 days after the rehearsal dinner when I overheard them. I wasn't snooping. God knows I never made a habit of that. But I had stopped by Daniel's house to drop off a box of tools he'd left in my garage, things from years ago that I figured he might want now that he was settling into that new upscale life he seemed so proud of. No one answered when I rang the bell, so I walked around to the side, thinking maybe they were in the backyard. That's when I heard Miriam's voice through the open kitchen window. "He's old, Daniel. If we don't talk to the lawyer now, the house might slip through our fingers." My hand froze on the gate. Daniel laughed. "He'll leave it to Emily, probably. She's the soft spot. Then you better get her on board now. Before he writes some sentimental will and donates it to a damn bird sanctuary or something." They both laughed. The sound punched something deep in my chest. I stepped back, silently, quickly, and returned to my truck, the box still in my arms. I sat there, staring at the dashboard, their voices ringing in my ears. The way they talked about me, like I was already dead. Like I was a problem to solve, a resource to acquire. I drove home slowly, my knuckles white on the wheel. They didn't know I had already rewritten my will once after Marjorie passed. At the time, I split it evenly between Daniel and Emily. I thought it was fair. Daniel had needs. Emily was still young. But I had always assumed they'd remember where they came from. That they'd honor the memory of what Marjorie and I built. That they'd protect the home that raised them. That afternoon, I went into the attic. Dusted off the old safe. Opened the folders. The will was there, as plain as ever, Daniel's name right beside Emily's. It made me sick to look at it. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, the kind Marjorie used to say tasted like burnt wood. I stared at that document until the sun went down. And then, I started remembering. Marjorie's laugh when I carried her over the threshold the day we moved in. Her soft humming on summer nights while she watered her flowers. The way we stayed up until midnight painting the nursery before Daniel was born. The wall where we marked his height with pencil lines every birthday, still there, still smudged with time. This wasn't just a house. It was a life. And they saw it as an asset. A property. Something to divide. I spent the next few days observing quietly, like a man watching the ocean draw back before a wave. At the wedding rehearsal itself, Miriam hardly looked at me. When she did, it was with that same tight, artificial smile. Daniel offered me nothing more than a handshake. A handshake. After everything. Emily smiled, hugged me quickly, whispered, "You okay, Papa?" I nodded. Lied. Said, "Of course." But her eyes held something. Something like guilt. Later, I was helping her carry a box of centerpieces to her car when she asked, "Are you staying long after the wedding?" "Why do you ask?" She hesitated. "Dad said you've been thinking about downsizing." There it was. The seed had been planted. I smiled. "Oh? And did I say that to him?" She looked down. "I don't know. Maybe I misunderstood." She hadn't misunderstood. They were working on her too, subtly, gradually. Trying to paint me as old, unstable, confused. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They were preparing. Planning. Trying to nudge me, gently or not, out of the home I had spent my life building. And the worst part? Emily, my Emily, was starting to drift with them. That night, I sat alone in the living room with the scrapbook I had made for her, still unopened. I flipped through the pages, pictures of her sitting in my lap, drawing on napkins, helping me stir pancake batter. Photos of Marjorie holding her, of the garden in full bloom, of Christmas mornings and library trips. I placed the book gently on the table and stared at the ceiling. A thought came to me, quiet, firm. It's not just neglect. It's a scheme. And for the first time in my life, I began to question not just their love, but their intentions. It wasn't just about being excluded. They wanted to take what was mine. To erase me, quietly, like chalk off a board. And so, I began to pay closer attention. Who visited? What papers Daniel asked about? How Emily looked at me when they thought I wasn't watching. I stopped speaking much, stopped offering help. I let them believe I was retreating. But I was preparing. Because if they wanted to play this game behind my back, they'd soon learn just how much I'd been listening, and just how far I was willing to go to protect what mattered. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. It was a quiet Thursday morning when I finally said something. Not out of anger. Not even pain. Just clarity. I was sitting on the front porch with a cup of tea, watching the wind sway through Marjorie's hydrangeas, when Daniel's car pulled into my driveway unannounced. He never came by without warning. I knew then, something was coming. He stepped out in slacks and a fitted shirt, sleeves rolled like he was trying to look casual, but his eyes were already rehearsed. "Hey, Dad," he said. I nodded. "Surprised to see you." He smiled thinly. "Got a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair next to me, Marjorie's chair. He hesitated before sitting. "Good. Let the ghost of her make him squirm." He looked out at the garden, then at the tea in my hand. "You've been all right lately?" "You mean since being benched at the rehearsal dinner?" He flinched. Just for a second. "I didn't mean for that to happen. It got chaotic, Anne." "Don't lie, Daniel." "Not here." He looked down at his hands. Rubbed his wedding band. "Okay. You're right. It was intentional. Miriam thought it would be best. There it was. He didn't even try to own it." "I see," I said. A long pause. Then he straightened in his chair. "Look, I came here because we need to talk about the house." I didn't blink. "Go on." He sighed, like he was doing me a favor. "We've been thinking, you might be happier somewhere smaller. Somewhere with a little support, less responsibility." "You mean a retirement home?" "It's not a bad thing, Dad. A lot of people your age." "Don't talk to me like a brochure, Daniel." His face flushed. "I'm not incompetent. I'm not sick. And this house is my life. It was your mother's life." He looked away again. "It's just a lot of space for one person. And what exactly would you do with it once I left?" He hesitated. "I see," I said again. He cleared his throat. "Look, we were looking into options. Assisted living communities, maybe a condo. We could even sell the place and put the money toward my funeral?" I said flatly. He stood up, agitated now. "Why are you making this harder than it has to be?" I rose, too, slower but steadier. "Because it's mine, Daniel. Every nail, every beam. I carried your mother over this threshold. I rocked Emily to sleep in that room. You learned to ride a bike on this street. It's just a house, Dad." "No," I said, stepping toward him. "It's home. And if you can't see the difference, then I failed as a father." He opened his mouth to reply, but I held up my hand. "Don't. Just, go." He stared at me. Something flickered in his eyes, anger, or maybe fear that I wasn't going to break like he expected. He left without another word. That night, I sat at the dining room table, the house quiet except for the creaks in the floorboards. I picked up the phone and called Evelyn, my neighbor and Marjorie's old friend. She answered on the first ring. "I was just thinking about you. I need a ride to town tomorrow," I said. "Lawyer's office." She didn't ask why. Just said, "Of course." She picked me up the next morning in her old Buick, still smelling faintly of lavender and cinnamon. We didn't talk much on the drive, but when we reached the office, she squeezed my arm and said, "You don't owe them anything." "Not anymore." I nodded. Inside, I sat with Harold, my lawyer of 20 years and once Daniel's Little League coach. He greeted me with a warm handshake. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I've got some changes I need to make," I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. "I want Daniel removed. Entirely. No house, no assets." "And Emily?" "I'm undecided. Leave her a modest trust. But nothing tied to the property." "Anyone else?" "Yes," I said. "If either of them contests the will, if they so much as raise a pen, everything goes to charity. All of it. The house, the savings, even the dog, if I get one." Harold smiled. "You're serious." "As the grave." We worked for 2 hours, going over every clause. I signed with a shaking hand, not from doubt, but from age and gravity. When I walked out of that office, something in me had shifted. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. Just clarity. I couldn't stop Daniel from trying to take what he wanted. But I could stop him from succeeding. And that gave me peace. When Evelyn dropped me off, she handed me a peach from her garden. "In case you forget what real kindness tastes like," she said. I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills, the peach soft in my palm. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. Because I knew the next time they tried to corner me, with smiles or pressure or shame, I wouldn't flinch. I wouldn't argue. I'd already written the final word. The next few days passed quietly, but not without weight. Every corner of the house seemed to lean in on me, as if asking, "Are you sure?" I was. Harold called to confirm the paperwork was finalized. "All legal," he said. "Ironclad. If they contest it, the Hospice Foundation gets everything." "You want a copy mailed?" "No," I told him. "I'll come pick it up. I want to hold it." So I did. The next morning, I drove myself to his office. It was a warm, cloudless day, but the air in the legal office felt cool and heavy, not unfriendly, just final. Harold slid the manila folder across the desk. "Still time to change your mind," he said gently. "I already have," I replied. He smiled, understanding what I meant. I'd changed my mind on everything, on what family meant, on who deserved what, and on the quiet myth that aging meant becoming powerless. It didn't. Not if you still had a voice and a pen. Back home, I opened the folder on the dining room table. There it was in black and white, Daniel's name, struck from every clause. Miriam had never been in it, but she was now erased from any possible inheritance by default. Emily's name remained, but reduced, just enough for her to know I still loved her, but not enough to feel entitled. And the clause, the one that brought me both sorrow and strange satisfaction, was crystal clear: if either of them challenged the will in any form, the entire estate would go to a hospice foundation in Marjorie's name. The Marjorie Ainsley Peace Garden Fund. It wasn't just a punishment. It was a promise. A way to turn pain into something useful. I thought of Marjorie as I read it. Her soft hands, the way she always said, "Turn what hurts into what heals." She used to say that about scraped knees and broken hearts. Now I was saying it to her ghost. I walked through the house with the folder under my arm. First, the hallway where Daniel used to run in his socks, skidding into the walls and laughing. Then the old nursery room, where Marjorie once fell asleep in the rocking chair, Daniel in her arms, moonlight across her face. I passed our bedroom, still exactly as it was the day she died, minus her perfume bottles, which I packed away the year after. And finally, the back garden. The hydrangeas were in bloom. The bench we built together needed repainting. I sat there and rested the folder on my lap, staring at the home we made from nothing but love and sweat. "This is still yours, Marjorie," I said aloud. I spent the weekend organizing. Not out of urgency, but purpose. I labeled documents. Updated the safe. Left a copy of the will in my lawyer's office and another in my safe deposit box at the bank. I made a third copy for Evelyn, sealed with a note, "Only open if they try to move me." On Monday, I called the local hospice office. Asked about their garden space, their funding needs, their interest in creating a new wing. They were surprised, but grateful. I didn't give full details, just said I had something in mind. After that, I sat on the porch again, tea in hand, and felt something close to peace. Until Daniel came back. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought Miriam. I saw their car from the kitchen window. Watched them linger on the porch before ringing the bell. Like they were rehearsing something. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Dad," Daniel said, smiling in that careful, artificial way I'd come to know too well. "We were just in the neighborhood. Funny how that keeps happening." Miriam held a pie. "Store-bought," I could tell. "We thought we could share dessert. Maybe talk about things." "I'm not hungry," I said. "What did you really come for?" Daniel exchanged a glance with her. Then, "We wanted to revisit our conversation about the house." Of course they did. Miriam stepped forward, her tone syrupy. "We just think you deserve something easier. And Emily could really use the help with." "Stop," I said. They blinked. "I've already made arrangements. The house is taken care of." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't need to worry about it anymore." "None of it." Miriam's eyes narrowed. "Did you change the will?" I didn't answer. Just smiled. The silence said enough. "You're making a mistake," Daniel said, voice rising. "This is emotional. You're not thinking clearly." I stepped forward, calm but firm. "I've never been clearer. You want a house. I wanted a family. Looks like neither of us got what we wanted." He looked like he wanted to argue. Miriam looked like she wanted to scream. But I didn't give them the chance. "I think we're done here," I said, and closed the door. I stood there for a long time, forehead resting against the wood, listening to their footsteps fade. They didn't knock again. In the silence that followed, I realized something profound. This house had been filled with love, yes, but also with ghosts. Of expectations. Of betrayals. Of everything I had allowed in the name of peace. Now, finally, I had drawn a line. And in doing so, I hadn't just protected the house. I had reclaimed it. It was the morning of the wedding, the day they assumed would be theirs alone, when the final cut came. I had laid out my suit the night before. The same navy one I wore to the rehearsal, now pressed with care. I'd chosen Marjorie's favorite tie, burgundy with a soft gray stripe. She once said it made me look like a man who knows what matters. I smiled at that memory as I straightened it in the mirror. Her locket rested in my breast pocket, close to my heart. Always. The ceremony was set for noon, but my ride never arrived. Daniel had promised, half-heartedly, that someone would come get me. "We'll send a car," he'd said. "Should be around 10:30. By 11, no one had shown. I called once. No answer. Left a voicemail. I waited another 20 minutes before taking my keys from the hook by the door. Old Reliable, my truck, sputtered a little before starting, but it got me there. The venue was all white tablecloths and carefully arranged floral arches. Everything looked perfect. Soulless, but perfect. I arrived just in time to see the guests being ushered into the outdoor chapel. I wasn't greeted. No one was looking for me. I had to flag down a young usher to find my seat. He checked his clipboard. Ainsley? That's right. I'm the bride's grandfather. He looked confused, then pointed toward the far edge of the seating area. Row 9, far right. I walked down the gravel path alone, watched by strangers. My seat was so far back I couldn't even see Emily's face clearly as she walked down the aisle. Just the outline of her dress, the soft shape of her smile. But I didn't cry. Not this time. I watched the ceremony in silence. When it ended, applause echoed through the garden, and the newlyweds walked past me without noticing I was there. At the reception, things only worsened. I was again seated far from the head table, shoved in between a distant cousin I barely remembered and someone from the groom's side who spent the entire meal on his phone. I waited for the toast. The moment came, the clinking of glasses, the hush of the room. Daniel stood, straightened his jacket, and took the mic. "My daughter," he began, "has always been the light of my life." I watched his mouth move, heard his voice say all the right things. He talked about love, about legacy, about family. Then, as if someone had pulled a string in his back, he turned toward me. "And to my father," he said, voice honeyed and hollow, who did the best he could with what he had. Polite applause. A few nods. That was it. No mention of the years I raised him alone. No mention of the sacrifices. Of Marjorie. Of anything that mattered. He sat down. I stood. Slowly. Calmly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the toast I'd written, the one they never let me give. Daniel saw me. His face tightened. Miriam froze. I walked toward the front of the room. Anxiety rippled through the guests. A few whispered. One woman whispered, "Is that her grandfather?" The DJ instinctively lowered the music. I reached the mic stand. Daniel stepped forward, blocking me. "Don't do this, Dad," he said under his breath. I looked him in the eyes. "You left me no choice." He tried to reach for the mic, but I was quicker than he expected. I tapped it once. The room went silent. "Most of you don't know me," I began, voice even. "I'm Henry Ainsley. I'm the man who raised the groom. Paid for this wedding. And, until very recently, believed family meant something." Murmurs. I continued. I had a speech prepared, stories, blessings, memories of Marjorie, my late wife, who would have loved to be here. But apparently, love doesn't fit the aesthetic. Louder murmurs. Some gasps. I pulled a small recorder from my pocket, the one Evelyn helped me set up. Pressed play. The audio filled the room. Miriam's voice, "He's old, Daniel. If we don't talk to the lawyer now, the house might slip through our fingers." Daniel's voice, "He'll leave it to Emily, probably. She's the soft spot." Laughter. I let it play for a moment longer before pressing stop. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Emily's face, pale, trembling, looked like a girl watching her house catch fire. I looked at her, then back at the room. "I changed my will last week," I said. "Daniel is no longer part of it. The house, the estate, all of it, will go to charity if contested. And before anyone thinks to comfort me, let me be clear, I'm not angry." I looked at Daniel again. "I'm just done." I set the mic down gently. walked away without a word. The whispers followed me out. But I didn't look back. Because in that moment, with the truth hanging in the air like smoke, I wasn't the old man they thought they could bury under silence. I was the voice they never expected to rise. And I had just begun to take my life back. I didn't drive straight home after the reception. Instead, I took the long way around the hills, past the old stone bridge where Marjorie once made me stop to take a picture because the sunset was too good to waste. I parked there for a while. Rolled the window down. Let the late summer air drift in and sit with me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even angry. What I felt was something quieter, but heavier, the kind of weight that comes when a long life finally collapses. That's what family had become, a lie I told myself to keep the peace. And now it was over. The next day, the phone rang before 9 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. And again. Voicemail. I didn't need to hear their voices to know what they'd say. Regret, outrage, maybe even a half-hearted apology buried inside a demand. I made myself a strong cup of tea instead, added just a pinch of honey, Marjorie's old trick for settling nerves. I listened to one message. Daniel's voice, clipped and tired. Dad, we need to talk. You embarrassed us. You didn't have to go that far. Didn't I? I deleted it. By Monday, the town was already buzzing. Evelyn came by with a bag of scones and a raised eyebrow. Heard you brought the house down. I gave her a look. I'm not gossiping, she said, raising her hands. Just, proud. You said what too many of us never get to say. We sat on the porch together, passing scones between us like communion wafers. That evening, I got a letter. Hand-delivered. No postage. Just my name on the envelope in Emily's handwriting. Inside, Papa, I'm sorry. I didn't know what they said. I didn't hear the recording until you played it. I thought they were just stressed. I should have said something sooner. I love you. I hope you know that. I folded it once. Slid it into my top drawer next to Marjorie's locket. I didn't reply. Not yet. Midweek, Daniel showed up again. This time, no pretense. He banged on the door. Dad, open up. I didn't move. I know you're in there. I stood in the hallway, watching the front door like it was just another wall. Finally, he shouted, you don't get to just cut me off. After everything. After everything? He drove off 10 minutes later, tires spitting gravel. Emily called once. Left a quieter message, I don't want anything from you. I just want to see you. When you're ready. That one I saved. By Friday, the buzz had reached the post office, the church, the barbershop. People I hadn't spoken to in years waved from their cars. The local librarian left a sticky note on my mailbox. That speech? Goosebumps. You still got it, Henry. But even with the attention, there was no joy in it. Just the deep exhale of finally telling the truth. A week later, I got an unexpected visitor. James. The groom. He looked awkward on my porch, tall, lanky, hands in his pockets like a schoolboy caught cheating. I don't expect you to be happy to see me, he said. I didn't answer. Just opened the screen door and let him sit on the steps. I didn't know, he said. About the house, the will, the things they said. I wasn't part of it. You married into it, I said evenly. He nodded. I know. Silence sat between us. He looked at the garden. Emily's been crying a lot. She's scared you won't forgive her. I don't think forgiveness is the right word, I said. She didn't break anything. She just stood by while it broke. He didn't argue. I think she wants to fix it, he said. I stared at the blooms. Marjorie's hydrangeas were starting to fade into their late summer blush, that soft mauve she loved. "She's welcome to come by," I said after a while. "Alone?" He nodded. "Thank you." He stood. Before leaving, he turned back and said something that struck deeper than I expected. "For what it's worth, I'd be proud to have you as family." Most people would have just stayed quiet. I watched him walk to his car. Later that night, as the sun dipped low, I sat with a notebook and wrote down 3 words. I am free. That was what the confrontation had given me. Not revenge. Not control. Freedom. From expectation. From manipulation. From the slow, suffocating feeling of being tolerated instead of loved. It wasn't the ending I once dreamed of. But maybe it was the beginning of something better. Speech balloon. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The days that followed were quiet. Not the comforting quiet of early mornings with coffee and birdsong, or the kind where Marjorie and I used to sit in companionable silence watching the garden grow. This was a hollow kind of quiet. Phone didn't ring. Mailbox stayed mostly empty. No footsteps on the porch, no neighborly waves from Daniel's car. The family had gone still, like a machine abruptly shut down mid-motion. No apologies. No screams. Just silence. And strangely, that silence was heavier than all the noise that came before. At first, I tried to distract myself. Swept the porch. Touched up the trim paint on the windows. Fixed the back step. All the chores I used to enjoy. But the silence crept in behind me like fog. Every squeak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, sounded louder than it should have. The town, though, had plenty to say. I couldn't walk into the bakery without someone leaning over the counter and saying, "You were right to do it, Henry." At the grocery store, the clerk handed me my receipt with a nod and a whispered, "Took guts." Even the barber, who hadn't said more than 10 words to me in years, gave me a free cut and muttered, "Respect." Funny thing, respect. It shows up after the storm, when the house is already missing its roof. One afternoon, I sat on the bench in Marjorie's garden and found myself speaking to her out loud, as I often did when no one was around. They don't even call, Marge. Like I don't exist. Like I just vanished. The wind didn't answer, but a bird landed on the trellis above me and sang a note so clear, I nearly wept. Marjorie used to believe in signs. Maybe I'm learning to again. That evening, Evelyn came by with a covered dish and a stubborn look in her eye. "You need company," she said, pushing through the door. "I didn't ask for any." "You don't have to." We ate in the living room, chicken and green beans, warm rolls, and strong tea. She didn't talk about the wedding or the will. Just asked how my tomatoes were doing and whether I'd be planting snapdragons this fall. "Maybe," I said. "Haven't decided." "You should," she replied. "Marjorie would haunt you if you let that soil go to waste." We both laughed at that, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel the weight so heavy on my chest. The next morning, I opened the scrapbook I had made for Emily. I had meant it to be a wedding gift, something personal, something that reminded her who she was before all the noise and pressure. I flipped through the pages slowly, her baby photos, drawings she made me, one of her and Marjorie in the garden, Emily no older than 5, holding a tulip in her tiny fist, smiling like the sun lived in her cheeks. I found myself whispering, "Come back to this, kiddo. Not for me. For you." I placed the scrapbook back on the shelf. I still wasn't ready to give it to her. Not until I knew it would be received with the heart it deserved. Later that week, a knock came. It wasn't Daniel. It was a neighbor, Tom, from 2 houses down. Younger guy, maybe late 40s. We'd shared a beer once during a block party about a decade ago. He stood there holding a clipboard and a sheepish grin. "Hey, Henry," he said. "Bit random, but I'm part of this town council project. We're thinking of opening a small community reading space or resource room. Nothing fancy. Just a warm place for kids or veterans to read, learn, rest." I nodded. "I heard you've got space. And heart." I looked past him, through the screen door, at the old sunroom Marjorie used to call her book corner. Light poured into it all day. No one had used it in years. "You think people would come?" I asked. He smiled. "If you open the door, they will." I thought about that all night. By morning, I had made a list. Of books to donate. Of furniture to move. Of shelves to build. The silence hadn't broken, not from Daniel or Miriam. But something else had begun, the flicker of new purpose. Not tied to inheritance. Not to blood. But to community. To service. To usefulness. Later that week, a boy from down the street, maybe 10 years old, knocked on my door. "My mom said you might need help lifting stuff." He wore a crooked ball cap and carried nothing but energy. I smiled. "I think I just might." We moved one old bookshelf that afternoon. He didn't ask questions. Just laughed when I dropped a stack of paperbacks and called them my workout for the day. When he left, I stood in the middle of that sunroom, dusty and half-empty, and saw it for what it could become, a place not filled with silence or shame, but with laughter, purpose, and warmth. I was still alone, technically. But for the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel lonely. Because I had stopped waiting for Daniel to call. And started listening to life calling me back instead. It started with one shelf. Then two. By the end of the week, the entire sunroom was cleared, dusted, scrubbed, and opened wide like a lung finally breathing fresh air after too long in the dark. I hadn't felt that sense of purpose in years. It wasn't dramatic. No grand epiphany. Just quiet movement. Simple work. The kind that tells your body, you're still needed. The boy who helped me lift boxes, Tyler, came back the next day with a folding wagon full of books. "My grandma passed last year," he said. "She used to read these to me. I think she'd want you to have them." I nodded, took the books with both hands. "She raised you right." He grinned and took off running down the street. Later that evening, I sat with a stack of those books, old hardcovers, some missing jackets, some with names scribbled inside. One title caught my eye, A Light in the Window. Marjorie used to read that to Daniel. She'd sit with him by the fireplace in winter, her voice soft as snow. That night, I lit a single lamp in the sunroom and opened the windows. It was still quiet, but the silence felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. The next morning, I made some calls. First to the library. Then to the local church. Then to the community college. I told them all the same thing: I'm opening a reading room. Not a business. Not a charity. Just a space. They were curious. Polite. Some asked why. I gave different answers depending on who asked. But the real answer was simpler than all of them. I needed to rebuild something with meaning. Not for Daniel. Not even for Emily. For me. And maybe for Marjorie too. Evelyn brought curtains the next day, pale green with little stitched flowers. "Found them in my attic," she said. "They reminded me of her." I hung them up myself. The sun shone through them like memory. The room took shape slowly. People started dropping by. A retired teacher brought math workbooks. A woman I didn't know left puzzles and crosswords in a basket on my porch. Someone else brought a kettle and left it on the steps with a note, "For tea and conversation. You've earned both." That afternoon, I picked up the phone and dialed the Hospice Foundation, the one named in my will. I told them about the reading room. "How can we support?" the director asked. "Just send folks who need it," I said. "The ones with no place to go, or too many heavy thoughts. Let them sit. Let them breathe." She promised she would. Later that week, I got a call from the local paper. A young reporter named Molly had heard about the project. "Would you mind an interview?" she asked. "People need stories like this." I hesitated. I didn't want it to be about me. Not in the way Daniel's speeches always had been, full of gloss and empty polish. But she came over, and we sat in the garden. She asked about the house, the idea, the name. "Is it called anything?" she asked. I looked at the house. The porch. The garden Marjorie planted. The bench where she once read poetry aloud when she thought no one was listening. "Yeah," I said. "It's called Marjorie's house." She smiled. Wrote it down. By the time the article ran, people started calling. Old students of mine. Veterans from the local shelter. Widows who had no one to talk to but were tired of being alone. They came not for books, necessarily, but for something else, warmth, belonging. And I gave it freely. Daniel hadn't called. Miriam hadn't shown up. Emily, to her credit, had written another letter, longer this time. More honest. I stayed quiet too long. I knew they were planning something, but I didn't think it would go that far. I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry for what I didn't do. I'm sorry for what I let happen." I kept that one. Read it twice. Thought about replying. Didn't. Not yet. The pain was still fresh. But something was healing underneath it. One evening, a woman knocked on the door holding a tray of cookies. Said she used to know Marjorie from book club. She looked around the room and smiled. "She'd be proud, you know." "I hope so," I said. She took a seat and stayed for an hour, reading a dog-eared novel she pulled from the shelf. That night, I found myself writing a new kind of list, not chores or errands, but dreams. Future plans for Marjorie's house. Add a listening corner, soft chairs, old radio, maybe a record player. Build a seed library in the spring for community planting. Invite local students to read aloud once a month. Create a photo wall, not just family, but new faces, new stories. Add Marjorie's peach pie recipe to the welcome table. It wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. It was about honoring what mattered, and sharing it with people who still believed in kindness, in quiet purpose, in second chances. I was no longer just a grandfather, or a father, or a man betrayed. I was a builder again. Brick by brick. Page by page. Marjorie's house became a different kind of home. Not the one filled with Sunday dinners, Christmas stockings, or birthday cakes. Those belonged to a past I couldn't return to. This was something new. Something gentler. Every week, more people showed up. Not many at first. Just a trickle. The veteran who lived 2 blocks down, Joe, a quiet man who'd been alone since his wife passed, came every Tuesday like clockwork. Sat in the same chair with a worn paperback and never said a word, but nodded at me each time he arrived. Then came the young mother, Rachel, with 2 children under 6. She read to them on the rug while sipping tea from one of Marjorie's old cups. "It's the only place they sit still," she laughed once. "You must have magic in these walls." Maybe we did. Or maybe it was just the feeling of being wanted without having to perform. Tyler, the boy with the books, kept coming back too. He started organizing the shelves alphabetically without anyone asking. One afternoon, he looked up and said, "Do you have anything with dragons?" I laughed. "Kid, I've got dragons, pirates, and time machines." His face lit up like I'd handed him the world. People donated lamps, rugs, blankets. Someone brought a rocking chair. The local school sent over extra copies of their student poetry anthologies. A church group offered baked goods every Friday, just to keep the place smelling sweet. It did. Every corner of the house started breathing again. Even the rooms I once walked through in silence now held the shuffle of feet, the creak of chairs, and the low murmur of stories being read aloud. One wall, the empty one near the fireplace, became something else entirely. I'd put up a corkboard and left a sign, "Leave a photo. Tell a story." Within a week, it was covered in snapshots and scribbled memories. A woman hugging her sister, captioned, "The last time we danced." A boy next to his dog, "Best friend. Still missed." A black and white wedding photo with the words, "We made it 48 years. I'd do it again tomorrow." People began calling it the memory wall. I didn't name it. They did. And that's when I realized something that nearly brought me to my knees. This was family. Not the kind that shares your blood, but the kind that shows up with casseroles, second-hand novels, and quiet presents. The kind that doesn't ask for inheritance, only connection. I found myself smiling more. Laughing, even. Evelyn said I looked 5 years younger. I told her it was just the new face cream. She swatted my arm and called me an old fool with a soft heart. I didn't argue. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, as I was stacking a new donation of books on the front table, I heard the door creak open and familiar footsteps hesitate in the hall. "Papa?" It was Emily. She stood just inside the threshold, hands clasped, eyes red-rimmed but steady. I set the books down slowly. Didn't say anything. She looked around, at the warm light, the shelves, the rug where children had drawn pictures earlier that morning. "This is beautiful," she said, voice quiet. "It feels like her." I nodded. She stepped further in, trailing her fingers along the shelf nearest the door. "I've driven past twice a week for the last month. I didn't know if you'd want to see me." "I wasn't sure either," I said. She blinked, then nodded. "That's fair." A beat passed. Then she looked at me. Really looked. "Papa." I didn't stop them. I didn't speak up. I thought I could fix it later. I thought I didn't have to choose. "You always have to choose," I said softly. "And silence is a choice, too." She swallowed hard. "I'm not here for anything. Not money. Not the house. I miss you." I studied her. She looked older. Not in a tired way, in a humbled way. I motioned to the chair across from mine. She sat. I poured her tea from the small pot Evelyn had left that morning. She took a sip, tears forming. "I've been reading your letters," I said. She looked surprised. "I wasn't ready before. I am now." Her lip trembled. "Do you think we could start over?" "No," I said gently. "But we can start from here." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. We didn't hug. Not yet. But we sat there for a long while, drinking tea and watching the afternoon sun stretch across the floor like a warm promise. She came back the next day. Brought a stack of children's books and sat on the rug with the little ones. Tyler showed her the dragon section. She laughed. Later, she helped me dust the shelves. Asked about the memory wall. Stuck up her own photo, her and Marjorie, in the garden, Emily no older than 7. She taught me how to be gentle. I forgot. I'm remembering again. That night, I stood in the doorway of the sunroom, hands in my pockets, watching the glow of the lamp light spill across the floor. I wasn't sure what the future held. But I knew this. Real family doesn't always share your name. Sometimes, they come in quietly. Sit down beside you. hand you a story, and help you write the rest. It was a rainy Tuesday when Daniel finally came back. No call, no message. Just the sound of tires on wet gravel, a car door closing, and footsteps I hadn't heard in weeks. I was in the kitchen making tea, peppermint this time, when I saw his silhouette on the porch through the glass. He didn't knock right away. Just stood there, his shoulders slightly hunched, hands in his coat pockets like a boy waiting outside the principal's office. I opened the door before he had the courage. He looked up, startled, then straightened. "Hi, Dad." The last time he'd called me that, it was from behind a microphone, wrapped in shame, clipped with ego. This time, his voice cracked. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He entered slowly, cautiously, as if expecting the house to scold him. The air inside was warm, the fireplace in the sunroom crackled quietly. A couple of neighbors were seated near the back, reading. No one looked up. He glanced around. "So this is the place." "This is Marjorie's house," I said. He nodded. "I saw the article. And the memory wall." I said nothing. Just motioned toward the kitchen. We sat at the small table, the same one where he once did spelling homework, where Marjorie once braided his hair while he pouted. Now, it was just 2 mugs of tea between us and years of silence. "I don't know how to start," he said after a moment. "Then don't," I replied. He looked down, ashamed. Another beat passed before he spoke again. "I didn't come for anything. I'm not here to change the will or fix anything. I just wanted to see you." I stirred my tea. "You've seen me. I deserve that." I finally looked up at him. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly now, not as my son, not as my legacy, but as a man who made choices and couldn't outrun the weight of them. "I did what I thought was best," he continued. "For Emily. For Miriam. For myself." "You left me out," I said. Not a question. Just a truth. He nodded slowly. "I did. Because I didn't want to face the parts of you that reminded me of what I couldn't live up to." That surprised me. "I thought you were too rigid, too sentimental, too stuck." I chuckled once, bitter and soft. That's rich coming from someone who wanted to take the house he didn't build. He closed his eyes. "I know. I see it now. Why are you really here, Daniel?" He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "Because I read Emily's letter." My chest tightened. She left a copy at home. Said if I wanted to understand anything, I had to read it twice. So I did. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She told me what she saw. What she felt. What she did, or didn't do. She owned it. He looked at me. "I haven't done that. Until now." I took a slow sip of tea. He placed the paper on the table. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I want to say that I'm sorry. Not because I got caught. Not because of the money. But because I forgot who raised me." I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the man he had become, but the scared boy inside him, the one who watched his mother die, the one I tried so hard to protect, the one who somewhere along the line mistook strength for coldness and love for control. And maybe I saw myself too. I reached for the paper but didn't unfold it. Instead, I said, "This house has no space for shame anymore." He blinked. "I'm not angry, Daniel. I'm tired. And I'm finally at peace." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I understand." We sat in silence, the kind that didn't feel empty this time, just honest. Before he left, he stood at the edge of the sunroom and looked at the memory wall. He pointed to a photo of Marjorie holding Emily in the garden. "She'd be proud of this." I walked up beside him. She'd be heartbroken over how we got here. He closed his eyes. I know. Then he turned to me. Will you ever let me be part of it? I don't know, I said truthfully. But showing up is a start. He nodded. Didn't ask for more. As he stepped back out into the rain, he paused on the porch. I know I broke something I can't fix. But I'm here if you ever decide to pick up a piece. I didn't answer. Just closed the door gently behind him. Inside, I sat back in my chair, holding his letter in my hand. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some wounds take time. But I'd left the porch light on, not for him, but for myself. To remind me that even after the darkest storms, someone might still find their way home. Speech balloon, would you have forgiven him? Let us know in the comments. The ribbon was nothing fancy. Just a piece of soft blue fabric Marjorie once used to tie her gardening hat, frayed at the ends, still smelling faintly of lavender. Evelyn insisted we use it for the ceremony. It's hers, she said, holding it up like something sacred. So we did. A small crowd gathered on the lawn that morning, neighbors, kids, widows, students, and a few faces I didn't recognize but welcomed just the same. Tyler stood up front, proudly holding the scissors. Emily stood beside him, hands folded, wearing a simple yellow dress, Marjorie's favorite color. Ready, Papa? She asked. I nodded. With a snip, the ribbon fluttered to the ground, and Marjorie's house was officially open. There was no band, no speeches, no grand unveiling. Just quiet applause, a few tears, and the sound of feet crossing the threshold into something made with love. The sunroom glowed with light. The shelves were full. The memory wall had grown, dozens more photos now, some overlapping, curling at the corners. Joyful moments. Small ones. Honest ones. Someone had framed Marjorie's recipe for peach pie and hung it by the tea station. It read, "Don't skip the salt, it brings out the sweetness." I stood in the corner for a while, watching people move through the space like it had always been theirs. Some sat down with books. Others poured tea, swapped stories, smiled. And then there were the kids, sprawled out on rugs, giggling over picture books, asking each other, "Do dragons drink soup?" and "How do you spell adventure?" It was messy. Lively. Human. Exactly what it was supposed to be. Evelyn walked up beside me. You did it. I shook my head. We did it. She smiled and slipped her arm through mine. Marjorie would have baked 3 pies just for today. I'd have eaten 2. She swatted me again. Greedy old goat. We laughed. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned and the last of the lemonade was poured, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The breeze was warm. The garden was in bloom. The bench we built, now painted a soft cream, stood like an old friend, waiting. I sat. Took out the letter Daniel left during his visit. I hadn't opened it until then. The writing was careful. Thoughtful. Dad. I don't expect you to forget what I did. I wouldn't, if I were you. But I want you to know I'm trying. Trying to unlearn the parts of me that thought legacy meant control. Trying to be the kind of man Mom would be proud of. I don't know if I'll ever earn my place back. But I hope, someday, I can sit on that porch again and not feel like a stranger. Thank you for building this, not just the house, but the truth. I needed it. I just didn't know how to say so. Daniel. I folded the letter carefully. Slipped it back into my pocket. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. That was something. Emily stepped onto the porch then, carrying 2 mugs of tea. Thought you could use one, she said, handing me the one with Marjorie's initials on it. Perfect timing. She sat beside me, quiet for a while, then said, I'm thinking of starting a weekly story hour for the kids. I raised an eyebrow. You? She smiled. I've got a lot to make up for. I nodded. That you do. Another pause. Then, softly, but you're doing it. She looked out at the garden. It doesn't feel heavy here anymore. It feels like her. I stared at the blooms swaying in the breeze, the smell of earth and new beginnings rising gently through the air. She never left, I said. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it. Inside, the front bell chimed, another visitor. Another story. Another moment waiting to unfold. This house, the one I built with sweat and heartbreak and stubborn love, had found its next purpose. Not as an inheritance to be split or a trophy to be claimed. But as a sanctuary. A storybook. A memory still in motion. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's yours again, Marjorie. Just the way you wanted." And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole.